art is politics, I'm not talking about slogans or necessarily banners or anything like that. I'm just talking about
or didactic material
no.
that, yeah.
But an artist has something to say. If they don't have something to say, then what is art? I mean, why do it?
While maybe not a household name like co-nominees Shirley MacLaine and Meryl Streep, Jane Alexander is an actor's actor. She's a Tony and Emmy winner who regularly worked on stage, on TV, and on a big screen. Maybe not always in the lead, but in roles that matter to her, relevant character parts that speak to her broader sense of commitment to the art of acting and what it can say about our world. She received Oscar attention for parts that might have gotten overlooked, or for movies that probably wouldn't even have made it to the big screen without her. When asked how she wants to be remembered, Jane Alexander said, "A good actor. I just want to be someone who did my job well. Did it so it meant something."
I just want movie stars to just be movie stars, you know? Joan Crawford never talked about the bomb. And neither did Greta Garbo or anybody, any of them. Why can't we just have the world we used to have? But we don't. It's different.
Looking back at her career, it's fair to say that she succeeded in both regards, and continues to do so. At the age of 81, she received her 8th Tony nomination in 2020, putting her on the same level as Jason Robards and Colleen Dewhurst, and she recently stated that, "I want to be known as the oldest actor ever to win an Academy Award. I said to my agent, find me the role so that I can stand up there and say, 'Tony, I beat you,'" referring to her friend and former co-star Anthony Hopkins, who recently became the oldest acting winner ever. And seriously, somebody make this happen. And besides the respect for the quality of her acting, she's also a performer known for being drawn to socially relevant material, controversial, displays of courage, symbols of hope, or a warning for us all. Her work should always say something, be important, and this ambition was probably never more realized in her career than in 1983's Testament, the story of a family struggling to survive the aftermath of the nuclear holocaust.
Televisions glowed, radios blared. Breakfasts were being served. Children were playing. Everything was as it should be. When suddenly, it could never be that way again.
The end of the 1970s and beginning of the 1980s saw the end of the so-called détente in the Cold War, the relaxation of the difficult relations between East and West. The Soviet invasion in Afghanistan and the election of Ronald Reagan caused the rise of new tension as military spendings rose dramatically, and the build-up of nuclear systems in the countries of the Warsaw Pact caused the NATO double-track decision, which saw increasing deployment of American missiles in Western Europe. The balance of terror seemed closer than ever to get out of balance. This threat also increased the public awareness of the situation and saw the rise of international peace and anti-nuclear movements, and also the release of various productions that dealt with the devastating effects and the aftermath of nuclear war. The most well-known production from this time is the television film The Day After, which premiered on November 20, 1983 on ABC and was watched by almost 40 million households in the US. Scenes of mushroom clouds, people turning into skeletons, and the general devastation of an atomic conflict caused endless debates and is supposed to even have influenced future policy decisions.
The purpose of our discussion tonight, I hope, is to try to move thoughtfully towards some certainty that that terrible experience in the film will always remain fictional for everyone.
But while The Day After was a big success, critics reacted not too kindly to it, calling it much tutored but disappointing, harsh but unrealistic, with one critic describing it as so awful that one ultimately has to root for the bombs. There was a different reaction, however, to a production that had opened a couple of weeks earlier, which also told of a world destroyed but in a much more quiet, personal way, and would ultimately bring an Oscar nomination to its leading star Jane Alexander. However, this recognition could initially not have happened. Testament is based on Carol Amon's story The Last Testament. Directed by Lynn Littman, who had won an Oscar for Best Documentary Short in 1977, the movie version was initially not supposed to get a theatrical release, but commissioned and co-produced for TV screens by American Playhouse. Shot in 6 weeks for the limited budget of $750,000. Jane Alexander described making the movie, "That's all we ever thought of. We were making a movie for public television. We all were working for scale, not a penny more." However, money was clearly not on Jane Alexander's mind when she worked on Testament. She referred to herself as a ban-the-bomb marcher from way back and was on the board of Women's Action for Nuclear Disarmament. She had already been familiar with the short story, which she couldn't get out of her mind, and she also recalled a recurring nightmare that she had during those years about a nuclear war that would kill her children. Setting a statement about the dangers of nuclear weapons was therefore already close to her heart when she was approached by Lynn Littman, with whom she had actually gone to school, about playing Carol Weatherly. The journey of Testament would then change dramatically when the finished production was pre-screened in Los Angeles. Director Littman recalled that people were stunned by the movie, and all of a sudden a bidding war began over which studio would get the rights to release Testament in theaters. In the end, Paramount was the winner of this war and decided to move the premiere of Testament up from February to November '83 to A. beat the premiere of the day after, and B. increase its award chances.
Seeing Testament is a devastating emotional experience. Both times I've seen this film, the audiences were left silent and speechless after the film was over. But it's not a violent film, it doesn't show a lot of graphic detail. It's about human relationships and behavior and about how this community tries to stick together and do the best that it can in a situation that grows more hopeless every day.
As already mentioned, critics reacted extremely positively to Testament when it was released. Interestingly enough, mainly due to the limitations it had experienced when it was made as a TV production. The fact that it was a quiet and personal story, not dominated by special effects or loud action, but instead small and simple, increased its effectiveness for many. It was described as a painful study of nuclear horror that tears the soul, unordinary people meets the bomb, devastating, excruciating, and stirring.
We're going to hear a lot about nuclear war movies this month, especially after ABC telecasts its After the Bomb movie the day after in a couple of weeks on November the 20th. Testament is a different kind of movie. It's about the human dimensions of the end of society.
However, in the end, Testament became a victim of bad timing. Because while critics clearly preferred Testament to The Day After, there was no question about what won the popularity contest. Testament's box office dropped by 90% after ABC broadcasted The Day After just a few weeks after its premiere. A producer of American Playhouse said, "The American appetite for the subject was satisfied." But it's also clear that while critics appreciated the limited scope of Testament, the much bigger The Day After had a larger appeal for audiences.
Is there anybody there? Yes, we're all still here in Kansas, in London, in Leeds, and in all the other city regions of the world. But that film presupposed that one day soon we might not still be here, or if we were, that we wouldn't be all that lucky to be alive.
Still, even if Testament was a box office disappointment and overshadowed by a bigger, more expensive production, its most praised aspect was able to overcome the general disinterest and stay in the conversation long enough to secure a place among the 5 Best Actress nominees of the year
for her portrayal of a woman's quiet desperation as she sees her life, her family, and ultimately her world disintegrating around her.
Jane Alexander's leading performance was hailed as full of restrained passion, a beautiful display of an intelligent mind groping for answers, and a calm personality reacting to injustice with dignity and determination. She was described as impeccably naturalistic, stunning, moving, heartbreaking, unforgettably excellent, and that her dramatic tour de force is as wrenching as the movie itself. Roger Ebert described her final moments as one of the most powerful scenes I've ever seen. Jane Alexander herself said that her Emmy-winning performance in Playing for Time had helped her to prepare for the role in Testament. "I learned that people in stressful situations, living at a minimal survival level, react the same way. They become numb. In order to survive, they close off the rest of the world." This attitude characterizes Jane Alexander's work and its approach that benefits her own acting style and personality. Jane Alexander is an actress who can express many emotions, but who also possesses the kind of stoic face that seems to suppress every feeling to the point of becoming completely evasive.
You think we should leave?
talking about northern Canada. Survival camps.
How are they going to get there?
Judging Jane Alexander's work in Testament is not easy for two reasons. One, the character is so closely connected to Testament itself that it seems impossible to separate them. Because I do agree with critics that it is a harrowing, devastating experience. I would not actually say that the movie is necessarily great, but certain images are impossible to forget. However, this is because of what they show, not because of how they show it. The limited approach of Testament due to the budget restrictions is actually the strongest point of the story. Testament doesn't answer any questions, it gives no clear picture. We as the viewer are just as helpless as the people in Hamlin, California. We don't know what exactly happened or how. All we know is that there is no hope. Testament presents a world that is marching towards extinction without any way to avoid it. It shows how life changes from one second to the next and leaves everyone completely helpless in the face of death and misery. But again, this moving effect doesn't come from how the movie is made, but only from what it is saying. And the character of Carol, a mother who is unable to stop the tragedies around her, becomes the symbol for this suffering, therefore making Jane Alexander's performance almost automatically heartbreaking and devastating.
Came to visit me, and all for the sake of my little nut tree.
And second, how is it possible to judge a character going through the most unimaginable situation? There is no blueprint on how to react to a nuclear holocaust. But Jane Alexander's comments about closing off in order to survive already indicate her thought-through and detailed approach to the part, and that, even if the sentiment behind the part helps her immensely, she earned the sympathy of the audience and created Carol with enough life and intelligence of her own to overcome many limitations of the movie, even if not all of them.
God said,
Forget God. No one is touching him. No one is burying him until I find his bear. You hear me? You understand?
Testament wisely takes time to establish the Weatherly family before the ultimate horror destroys their world. Those moments might feel unnecessary in the grander picture of the plot, and the tensions between Carol and Tom will ultimately not lead anywhere, but Jane Alexander uses these scenes to present Carol as a loving, no-nonsense person with clear affection for her children and her husband, and who enjoys the life she is leading, even if she has worries like everybody else.
Ronnie Peebler didn't register for the draft. He's been indicted. I don't know what's gonna happen.
It's the presentation of the Weatherlys as a, quote, normal American family that makes the later effects even more harrowing. From the moment of the atomic explosion, Jane Alexander plays Carol as a woman who tries her best to keep up a normal life, but who crumbles under the personal tragedies, who makes her exhaustion tangible through the screen, but keeps going as best as she can.
When's the television gonna work? What are we gonna do today?
No more questions, okay?
Her stoic, always mask-like face helps wonderfully to create haunting images that show a woman who tries to keep her distance from the things that are happening to her, as terrible as they may be, in order to keep functioning as a human being.
My firstborn. My daughter.
The calm nature of Jane Alexander's performance works very well to balance everything that is happening around her. She is the quiet reference point for the audience who makes the story bearable, even in its most unbearable moments. But even as the calm center, Jane Alexander displays the ordinariness of death with gripping effect, and her calm voiceover is a haunting addition to the images on the screen.
I don't know what day it is. I've lost track. The cemetery's full. They're burning the bodies.
The movie in general gets its strongest moments when it focuses on Jane Alexander, as she brings pathos, strength and sadness to her part, referencing moments that the audience most likely forgot.
We'd miss goodbyes. Bye, Mom.
Or working against the audience's expectations in key moments that underline how the situation is impossible to judge from the outside.
I'm gonna have to stay in San Francisco after all. All these false alarms. I'll make it up to you, I promise. Give the kids a kiss. And love to you.
Still, it sometimes feels that a bit more progress in Jane Alexander's performance might have made a bigger impact beyond specific situations. Jane's work excels in scenes that focus on her, but occasionally misses a connection and development. The numb reactions of Jane feel almost the same at the end as they do at the beginning, and prevent the character from becoming a stronger presence. Her single breakdown near the end therefore doesn't feel as freeing as it could have if Jane Alexander had made the inner life of Carol clearer for the audience. The moment is also not helped by a slightly melodramatic acting style and by the sudden shift to the Songbirds moment. But to be fair,
the priest is quite hot, so hot.
I know we all complain about movies being too long nowadays, but Jane Alexander's work would certainly have benefited if the movie had given her more room to develop the part over time. Her characterization is strong and benefits the movie, but it would have worked better in a surrounding more interested in her beyond specific scenes of tragedy. It's therefore a curious performance, one that is defined by what is happening to the character instead of what the character is doing, and one that is able to break the viewer's heart, but mostly due to the circumstances beyond her control. Jane Alexander is clearly the best part of Testament, but not the main reason why it works so well. Still, within the limitations, it is an outstanding portrayal that played to her greatest strength as an actress and leaves an unforgettable impression.
When you love someone, you want to be as close to them as you can get. You make love, and you feel almost like the same body. Like it was intended.
Despite the hopeless tone of Testament, Jane Alexander described it as a story that doesn't leave us without hope. It's a story about family love. Maybe people will see it and decide that we've still got time to stop such a thing from happening. A sentiment that seemed lost as new atomic weapons were deployed in Western Europe just a month after the movie's premiere. But Jane still looked ahead positively. As long as we have someone to love and care about, we have a reason for existing. So let's move on to a nominee who finally provides more laughs than tears.